welcome to Procurement Pivots, the podcast for procurement professionals wanting to navigate change successfully and create career success on your own terms. I'm Donna Bowden, procurement career coach and founder of Narrate Your Career.
And I'm Laura Sellers, executive coach for procurement and founder of Coaching for Procurement. And between us, we bring almost 25 years of supporting and working with procurement professionals. And it's fair to say we've navigated many of our own career pivots along the way. And now we're here to help you do the same.
Each episode will share practical strategies, honest conversations, and expert insights to help you confidently tackle the changes and challenges in your procurement career.
Let's get started. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of the Procurement Pivots podcast. And this week's theme and topic is the subject of validation, which is something that Donna and I often talk about in our coaching sessions with our clients. So would you like to offer a bit more context there, Donna?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think often the themes of our conversations with our clients are related to validation. I don't know actually that the word validation necessarily is coming up lots for us, but I think when we've kind of spoken about some of the, the common patterns and themes that we're seeing with clients, often they are coming to us feeling that their value is not recognised. They're feeling sometimes invisible, undervalued, just really that sometimes there is a lack of understanding of the good things that they're doing. And so, I think, there's lots of different strands to this, but essentially, it very much links back to validation. So we thought it'd be a really good topic just to kind of bring to you all today, just to kind of delve a little bit further into it.
Yeah, it's definitely a common theme. It might not be the thing they come with, but it comes
Mm,
up quite a lot. And
yes.
it's definitely linked for me to feelings and themes of recognition. So we really wanted to delve into the strands that make up this topic, because it's not just one thing, it's very multifaceted.
Yeah.
And it has connotations and wide ripple effects, I think, when you are able to grasp hold of validation and what it means and how you take it on board for your career.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. So with your clients, Laura, because obviously we're working with similar people. Typically, it's quite senior procurement professionals, but often we're helping them with different challenges and very much helping them often in different ways. So with the clients that you're working with, like, how does this show up? Like, what are the kind of, the big challenges and issues that they're facing in relation to kind of validation, would you say?
yeah, I think the initial element is around building their influence at a senior level. You mentioned about feeling invisible and feeling like they're undervalued and misunderstood. So we are looking at developing their leadership, their strategic thinking, how to influence, how to stay not removed, because I think it's quite impossible in the corporate world, but manage company politics and not come
Mm,
away from them feeling frustrated. And validation is a huge part of that, and recognition. I often hear in coaching conversations, in team coaching conversations, I want them to know that I know my stuff.
mm,
And well, they don't always say the word stuff, they use another word beginning with S, but like, and so the curiosity in a coaching conversation really delves into, well, what does that mean? What does it sound like? What does it look like? Because sometimes the validation is there, but our filters might not be processing them. Filters, if you're watching, I'm doing this with my eyes, but sometimes that recognition and that validation can take various forms. So I think that's what we'd like to really delve into that today. And that's
mm.
what it works out for me. I know you've touched on what it's like for you. Is there anything else in your coaching conversations when they come to you about validation?
Think most of the clients I'm working with, it's to support them to navigate some kind of, I suppose, move typically within their career. Now that might be remaining where they are and progressing in their current role. It might be moving externally into a new role. And so often I think it's linked to, the recognition that is sometimes not there, and they feel that that's holding them back. So it's stopping them maybe hearing about those internal opportunities, maybe stopping them, getting the feedback from stakeholders, getting the promotion, and certainly externally, a lot of it is about, really feeling that people externally don't understand their value and in a competitive job market, which we've definitely seen over the last few years at senior levels, like really like how do you convey that to people in the outside world so that they actually know what you bring to the table.
Yeah. And you mentioned about externally, and I get the sense that whenever we think about validation and that recognition, we are focused more on the external stuff than the internal stuff. So would that be a good place for us to start with delving into what external validation
Yeah,
looks like
yeah.
and how it shows
Yeah,
up?
yeah. And I think just on that, like we've probably already, we're only a few minutes in, we've probably already used external in a couple of different ways as well, haven't we? So,
Yeah.
we've spoken about the external job market, looking for a role in a different company, in a different, different industry, but actually there's also that kind of the internal versus external that we've also spoken about. So us, how we feel about ourselves versus, kind of seeking validation from others externally, not necessarily external to your company, but
Mm.
external to you. So yeah,
Mm.
I just thought maybe I should clarify that because we're using the
Yes.
same word external actually in a couple of different kind of senses
Yeah.
already.
Very true. Very true.
Yeah, but yeah, I think that sounds like a good place to start, definitely.
So why would you start with the external element?
So let's focus on the need and the desire to get that validation and recognition from others. So let's start with the others, because I think that is very much a very, very common topic, and often, that is one of the big topics that clients are really kind of finding quite difficult, I would say.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great one. So I think something to really hone in on here is that validation from others, recognition from others, it is important, but we have to
Mm,
be strategic, considered, intentional about who we're getting it from, who we're asking for it from, because I find from some of the conversations I have that we're focusing on getting it from the wrong people that are not relative to the next move, the next goal that they're looking to achieve.
yeah. Yeah, no, I think that's an interesting point. So typically, when they are kind of maybe hoping to get that validation from possibly not the right people, like where are they going wrong, would you say, with that?
But I think in a hierarchical sense, we might look to our line managers. If we're dealing with the C-suite, we're looking at the people who we see as having the most power and control over our next move. And I don't know if I brought this up in another episode. It's something I do talk about often. Sometimes we've still got the voice of somebody else ringing in our ear who's no longer relevant to our career. So
Yeah.
if we've been damaged from a particular relationship with a line manager,
Mm,
with a very tricky stakeholder, sometimes I find that when somebody is on that treadmill of trying to get the right validation, they've still got that voice in the back of their mind, trying to prove to that other person, and so it clouds our judgment for whose we actually need that's going to help us to get to the next step. So it's something that I like to call out safely,
mm,
and challenge in a way that offers insight because and I fall victim to this, okay? I have fallen victim to this in the past. So it's definitely it's just a really good place to start when we're looking for that external validation, right? Who have we got in our mind? Let's get them out.
yeah,
There's a great coaching tool called the inner boardroom that's around that. Who is on our boardroom? Who do we listen to more? Who challenges us? Who's our
yeah,
cheerleader? Who's the naysayer? Because sometimes we focus our attention on the naysayers,
yeah,
and there are other people who could help with that.
yeah. Yeah, I think that's yeah, really helpful actually, kind of looking at, who are those key people? And then I think it's the like how, potentially as well. How what are those things that we can do actually? We speak about control, we've spoken about it fa fairly regularly on other episodes. Some things are within our control and some things are totally out of our control. And obviously, stressing about the things that are out of our control is not that helpful. So I think it's also then looking at, like, when you do understand who the right people are, it's kind of then looking at, well, I suppose, also what kind of validation is it? So who is it that you want it from? But what is that validation that you're actually hoping for and looking for? And so the what, I guess, and
Mm.
then I suppose the how of what are the things that you could do that are within your control that could influence, I suppose, the understanding of that other person, of whatever it is you're hoping that they understand and they recognize and they
Mm.
see.
So how do you go about the how?
So I think there's I think there's probably various things that you can do, and obviously everyone's situation is going to be quite different. So
Mm.
some people are doing some things, some people are maybe not necessarily doing lots to influence. But I suppose it's looking at things like how do you show up to that person? Kind of, what are you making visible? Like within procurement, there's a lot of brilliant stuff that goes on and it's very, very hidden, very, very hidden. And actually some people say, it's often when things go wrong that you see that, but actually if things are going really well, they're just kind of ticking along really well in the background, and people don't necessarily see the work, the effort, the disasters that were avoided by doing that good stuff. So I suppose it's looking at, how are you communicating with that individual and what are you showing them and how are you showing it? So, how are you sharing, how are you choosing to share some of that stuff that is kind of is being done. But I think feedback as well, asking for feedback, then kind of thinking about how do you respond to that feedback? What do you choose to do with it? Who do you then share that feedback with? So I think there's quite a few things that you can do that can help to, I suppose, educate some of the time, educate those people and bring some of that stuff that may be invisible. It might not be invisible, and that's a different scenario if it's not being recognised. But helping to bring some of that invisible stuff to the kind of
Mm.
the forefront.
Yeah. Yeah, and feedback's such a tricky one because people need to be willing to give it as well, right? I think we've we've
Mm,
we've covered this before, and so but it's definitely something to seek regularly, not just for your end of year review, not just
yeah,
for certain specific times. Maybe if you're thinking about it in a team sense as procurement, how the validation of procurement as a function. Do you do like pulse check surveys, regular check-ins with teams to
yeah,
see what progress has been made? So that's a really good one. And I think something was said earlier, and it made me think about as well when we're looking for validation externally from others. Something that I learned when I was training to coach was around recognition, how you get recognition for
mm,
doing your job, and then there's recognition for being. So, an example to distinguish those: recognition for doing a job well done, a great project, for executing a great project, as an example, for handling a situation, a difficult, tricky situation really
mm,
well. And then there's recognition for being influential, for being a kind leader, for being
mm,
empathetic. And sometimes, while both of those types of validation are really important, sometimes we can get them mixed up where we get some feedback about a project that wasn't so well executed, and we filter that, interpret it as feedback for being, oh, that means I'm not influential. It means that
yeah,
I'm not a good communicator. I'm not efficient at what I do. And so the being element can damage our self-esteem
yeah,
a bit more.
yeah,
So I found that really useful when I learned about that. And So whenever it helped me to really reframe feedback and to think about how I interpret feedback. Because for me, the curiosity always comes back, or the answers always come back to ourselves and for how we relate to validation, how we relate to recognition. Because sometimes that recognition can be there, that validation can be there. And depending on how we feel about those
Yeah.
things, we might not always take it on board. Some people don't like to take on board compliments, so they might filter those out.
I mean, actually, that is quite a regular thing that I hear from clients that I work with, that they really they want that recognition, but actually they really struggle to receive it, and
Mm,
sometimes recognize it and acknowledge it when it is actually there.
yeah.
And that is actually quite common, and that's quite complex, isn't it? I want it, but I don't want it.
I feel
And absolutely,
uncomfortable. Sorry.
absolutely, yeah, absolutely. So, um, yeah, I think, yeah, this kind of it's. I just wanted to say as well, let's normalize, people want that recognition, in their career, like, seeking that recognition from others. It can be really helpful. It can really kind of help some of the time with your progression internally, certainly with your self-confidence. So I think, it's not a bad thing at all to want and need and desire that recognition
Mm.
from other people. um but I think often, um I would encourage people to really think about how can they then influence, what can they do to influence that happening. And often it's not just gifted. And I think, bad news or kind of criticism often travels a lot quicker. And so if a project hasn't gone well, people feel obliged to pick up those things that didn't go well, but often they're not volunteering the positives as well. So, it is quite common that you only hear the kind of, the challenges or the things that aren't working, but not all of those things that are going really, really well. So yeah, I think just thinking about what can you do to actually influence and encourage a balanced a balanced view of what's happening.
And I think that's a great point. I love when you were using the word influence because when it comes to the influence that we exercise, we're focused on, getting that validation for procurement, but something from an influence perspective that's really important is to also offer recognition and validation to others, to your stakeholders, to your team,
Yeah.
because sometimes we might be focused on the validation that procurement might or might not be getting, or as an individual, we
Mm,
might or might not be getting, but we sometimes overlook the power of offering that recognition first.
yeah.
So I remember sitting in, I think they call them calibration sessions in many cases, but I remember sitting in one of those and like talking about the talent in the team and such, and even if it wasn't those sessions, it was more the leadership sessions that we were doing. If I was hearing consistent feedback about somebody, sometimes the responsibility might be on the line manager to go and say something. But
Mm,
if I saw that person in the kitchen for a coffee, I said, "Oh, I've been hearing great things about you
yeah.
recently." Because sometimes that recognition just doesn't travel. Like you say, the bad stuff can travel. But I wonder whether as well that the good recognition doesn't travel purely because we assume that somebody knows they're really good at doing that when they're
Yeah.
naturally really good at that. So two things out of what I've said there. There's the making sure that we do pass on the good stuff,
Yeah.
generally, whoever that is.
Yeah.
But second of all, to influence, I think procurement also needs to offer that recognition. Tell your stakeholders if
Yeah.
they're doing a good job about how easy they are to do business with,
Yeah.
because you'd be surprised at the reciprocity you would get back, which again is another influence lever, if you like. And it's you'd be surprised at how you get it back when you offer it first.
Yeah. And I love that. And actually, it reminds me kind of yeah, fairly recently, within a couple of days, I saw a couple of brilliant examples on LinkedIn actually, where procurement leaders had called out some brilliant stuff that was going on
Mm.
for their stakeholders. And
Yes.
I just really loved that because you don't see that very often, but it was a
No.
call out. It was like, I just wanted to highlight the brilliant work of my stakeholder on this project. They've done X, Y, Z. And I was like, wow, that's brilliant. We don't see that very often at all. And actually, yeah, I think there is this kind of sentiment like procurement is there to serve the business. Procurement is there to serve the stakeholders. It's almost like, those relationships sometimes are not being positioned on a level playing field. And it's kind of like, we're procurement, we're the ones who want the feedback, we're serving you. But actually, I think, like you say, also offering it, we have a valid point of view, we'd like to share it with you. It's all individuals, right? That, actually, regardless as to whether you're a stakeholder or procurement or senior or mid-level, like, people they like to receive that praise
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
feedback, and also, sometimes the constructive feedback as well, not just the
Mm.
like, we don't want kind of, that kind of false positivity or toxic
Mm.
positivity. It's like, a balanced view.
Mm.
But I think, actually positioning yourself as an equal partner to that stakeholder, regardless as to the kind of hierarchy within the organization, I think actually can also do wonders for the perception coming back as well.
Mm, I think that's such a great point, and I think maybe this would be a good time to look at that internal validation that we were
Mm,
talking about because, and I know we've talked about different contexts of internal feedback versus internal
yeah.
self-recognition, but I also wonder whether we forget that even though procurement is striving to get that recognition, we forget that our stakeholders are also human, and our stakeholders are also
Yeah.
needing that validation and recognition because everybody's fighting their own battles, especially as you go further up the ladder.
Mm,
You'd be surprised at how a CEO might crave some recognition in a really
yeah.
positive way because we assume that the higher up somebody goes, they're obviously good at what they do. They've been rewarded, they've been promoted. Oh, they don't need to know these things. And again, we're putting ourselves in this discounted position of everybody else is up here, everybody else gets this recognition, this function is more valued, etc. But how much power would there be into in understanding the human dynamics and understanding how influence and recognition works, where we realize that we're on a level playing field with these people? It might not feel like it in title and perception, but if we took that stance, what can we control when it comes to that validation? Oh, because you hear me getting excited there. I'm like, oh yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So the internal bit then, I think, we both experience that actually often when our clients are coming to us, they think the biggest kind of challenge for them actually is I'm not understood by these people.
Mm,
I'm not recognized. They're not seeing the great stuff that I'm doing. And that is a factor. And certainly, with myself and I know with yourself, some of the work we're doing to help people is looking at, okay, well, how could you influence that? What is within your control? How could you shape that? How could you build momentum? But actually, some of the time, the real challenge, it's not necessarily, you know, wholly, the external people's kind of recognition. It's actually, how does that person feel about themselves?
mm,
And I think, with some individuals, that real desire and need and craving of that external acceptance and belonging and
mm,
recognition, it comes because how they're feeling about themselves, and often there is quite a low kind of self-worth, self-belief, self-confidence, and
mm,
they're kind of desperately craving that from others to feel better. But actually the real work is around, okay, well, what are the things that you can do
mm,
to start building your own self-belief and self-confidence first? Because actually, we said it before, like, if you don't really understand the value and kind of the strengths and the wins and the achievements, like actually those other people, like they stand no chance. Like we need to, like everyone's busy. You're not sat in an office generally
Mm.
watching what your colleagues are doing. You're busy doing your own stuff, focusing on your own stuff, your own personal life, your own problems. And like, if as an individual, if we don't understand it, like, how on earth can those people even understand it, really?
Yeah,
So I think,
yeah,
like, that's often, I think people often think, like, can we work on the like what others think? But often, it's much more than that. It's not just about that. It's kind of, okay, well, let's start with how you feel about yourself.
yes, yes. And I will always come back to it always starts with self. And
Yeah.
one of the most sustainable long-term career moves you can make is to think about how that's showing up for you all the time before asking what's showing up for the stakeholder. Or for the team or for whoever it is you're trying to get validation from. Your own relationship with validation is a huge clue to how you get that breakthrough. And we talked about this a couple of episodes ago in the progress over perfection. And I was
Mm,
talking about the drivers that the driver behavior that we default to when we're under pressure. And we were talking about the be perfect
yeah.
one. Now, there's another one that's about pleasing other people, that I'm only okay if I please others.
Mm,
And we get our self a sense worth a sense of self-worth
yeah.
from pleasing other people. And when you are in a role like procurement or any other operational role that is about serving the needs of the people within the business, I think it's a really easy trap to fall into. We've all got our own driver behaviors from growing up, right? With our human nature as individuals before we even get into the workplace. But I think that pleasing others trap is so easy to fall into in roles like procurement, like operations, supply chain, any of these where you're trying to fulfill the needs and wants of your stakeholder.
Yeah.
So, so that I'm only okay if I please others. If you're aware that when you are under pressure and under stress, you default to trying to please others, that is such a powerful awareness to then make the change. Because if you are pleasing others, you're not meeting your own needs. That leads to burnout. It leads to overwhelm, which is another upcoming thing we're going to be talking
Yeah.
about. And yeah, it's a tangled web of lots
Isn't
of
it?
different things. So you're
Yeah.
absolutely bang on. You're on the money. And that's where we would always start in a coaching conversation, right? Because it is about what's in their control. It is about them understanding
Mm,
themselves. What can you do to
yeah.
change that relationship or make that a healthier relationship
Yeah.
with yourself when it comes to recognition
Yeah.
and
And it,
validation?
and this is complicated, and this is why, people will often really benefit from working with some kind of coach or maybe
Mm,
mentor, um, because I think, sometimes the thing that you think you're really struggling with or you have an issue with, that's not the actual real
yeah,
cause or the real issue. And sometimes it's really, really difficult when you're in it yourself to really
yeah,
see that. And just, kind of working through that with someone else
mm,
I mean, it can be game changing, can't it,
yeah,
really? For really, like, you're focusing, you're stressing on this thing, but actually, and I think stress and overwhelm, again, you said we're going to be coming to overwhelm, but stress and overwhelm comes when we don't feel that we're in control.
yeah,
So actually, what can we control? What small things can we do differently? Can we improve? Can we focus on? Because what we focus on is typically what grows and what improves. What are those things that are within our control? Because yeah, it's really stressful and overwhelming when you're like, all this stuff's happening to me, and I don't know what to do about it, versus actually, okay, well, I think if I change these small things and focus on them for the coming weeks, months,
mm,
etc., like actually you feel a lot better knowing you're
yeah,
taking steps to kind of to action.
absolutely. And you're empowered, aren't you? You've got that
Mm,
choice, and that's what our job is as coaches. Like you just said, sometimes it is better to work with somebody who's external,
Yeah.
to what you're going through, because they're not impacted by the company politics, by the games that might go on,
Yeah.
or understanding what hidden things are going on. So our job is to hold the mirror up to that individual. And I've certainly I can think of a couple examples here from coaching clients, and they're actually both of them are CPOs, the examples I've got, where it's where when you're working with a coach over a sustainable period, over a long time, the coach will remember things that you might have forgotten. So I did this with a client on Friday. I
Yeah.
said, "Do you remember?" I said, "Do you remember this was brought up before by this
Yeah.
stakeholder?" And they were like, "Yeah." Oh my word. And it set off that light bulb that actually they had what they needed with what we were talking about there. And with the other one, it was around where um they'd done something and they felt like it was not career ending, but they were like, "Oh, that was uncomfortable." And I said, "But do you remember when that happened before? And what happened after it? Oh, it was the biggest breakthrough of my career." Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's about and holding that mirror up. But as
Yeah.
coaches, we recognize patterns that our clients might not see,
Yeah.
because we're not attached to the overwhelming day-to-day
Yeah.
stuff that's going on for them in the organization. So to pick out those little gems, and then we give them the tools to keep that going for themselves, don't we?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
and I don't know why I feel the need to say this now, because it just made me think of it from those scenarios. When you work with a coach over a period of time, the point is not to be dependent on that coach to give you the validation.
No.
Our job is to give you that insight to build that toolkit for yourself.
Yeah.
So we're going through that with you at that period of time. Let's say it's 6 months. Sometimes people extend and they do for 12 months, in the cases that I work with. And so by the time they come out of that coaching relationship, they've got a toolkit to keep building on that momentum. And we've talked about momentum so many times, haven't we?
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. So I think kind of in relation to this topic, I think just almost split out the kind of the kind of the recognition that you're seeking from other people, and as you say, kind of who are those other people that are most important, most relevant, most influential for what it is you're trying to achieve in your career, and just try and almost split that out from your own recognition of your kind of ability, strengths, worth, value, etc. Because they are different topics, but they're so interwoven and they're so linked. And generally, um, where people are, hoping for better recognition, like often, yeah, that is a reflection of how they're kind of feeling and where maybe some of their kind of own worries or concerns or kind of lack of confidence might sit.
Yeah, yeah, and I think they're great points there. We've talked about the who, we've talked about the external parts, and it will always come back to, for me, to the internal stuff as well. If you've got a good grasp and sense of self-worth and
Yeah.
being curious about your responses when it comes to that validation, because we can go looking for
Yeah.
it and we might discount ourselves or discount some of it. So being curious always about your own response, your own relationship with yourself, that human skills toolkit, really, that it does start with
Mm,
yourself before it can have that ripple effect with the
yeah.
others.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so
Uh,
and it's sustainable. Sorry, that's the
yeah.
other thing.
Yeah. I was going to say that just being kind to yourself, like, and recognizing your own strengths, your own value. Um, there's a lot of really good senior procurement professionals out there that actually they have been struggling to see that sometimes at times. And I think, you know, often they, you know, not giving themselves the space to actually see the good. My most of my work, not all of it, but it's forward looking, and a lot of what we're doing, we're focusing much more on the positives, the strengths, than the kind of trying to overcome weaknesses or areas for development. It's like, actually, how can you just really see all that great stuff that you're doing and recognize it and celebrate it and remember it? And that
Yes.
just does such a lot for your self-confidence when you've got
Yeah.
a a way of seeing, like, yeah, fine, we're human, we're people. Like, there's always going to be things that you can improve, learn, develop. And if you think there's not, then you're not particularly self-aware, I would say. There's always, especially if you've got a growth kind of mindset, there's always stuff that you can improve. But actually just being kind and just working out what is the best way for you to really, really understand your strengths, your skills, all those positives, your wins from the past, your achievement. I mean, there's a lot of different things kind of with my clients, like, we build logs and, different ways,
Mm.
different things work for different people. But it's
Yeah.
like, firstly, how can you just see it and understand it yourself? And when you see it, sometimes on paper, like, it makes it more real, and you start to believe it. And actually, when you start to believe it, that's when your own kind of self-worth and self-confidence really starts to shine.
Yeah, and I'd like to refer back to something that we were talking about. I think it was in the previous session. So I always like to make links between our episodes because I think it is about building that toolkit for yourself. But that thing we were saying in the imposter syndrome episode, like you don't start from scratch ever. Nobody starts from scratch. This is never about fixing
Yeah,
a person. This is about getting your strengths together,
yeah,
recognizing where they are and building upon that. So we're not in the business of fixing here. We don't need to fix anybody. Everybody's got their own worth, their own
yeah,
uniqueness, and it's about, like you say, it works differently for everybody. Some people don't like the logs, some people like
yeah,
doing it in other ways, and recognizing what those are that work for you is going to be a more effective and more powerful toolkit, right?
yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
So, what would be a takeaway for you, for people today then, Laura?
Yeah. Start with self always, and recognize that relationship you have with validation and offer it to others because that really
Mm,
does build influence.
yeah.
What are your
Um,
takeaways?
oh, I think there's lots. I need to narrow
Yeah.
it down, to be honest, on this one. But I think just, I mean, I think it has to come to that self piece as well,
Mm,
really. I think, you know, people watching or listening to this are going to know whether they're feeling really self-confident right now or not. And I think it's just really starting with thinking about, what are the things that you can do to be kind to yourself and recognize your own self-worth and what
mm,
you've brought and what you've delivered and the impact, the difference you've made. And then think, for that kind of, the recognition from others, what are the things that you can do to influence, and yeah, influence kind of, that recognition that might come back to you.
yeah. Yeah, absolutely. We always, like to put that focus on what we can control because we can't control everybody and everything. It was never about that, was it? It's about
Yeah.
staying, it actually reduces the overwhelm. So yeah, that's a great
Mm,
point. Great point
cool.
there. Oh, I love this
So,
topic.
I mean, I just think, yeah, this is it's a real topic that I think is affecting so many people, and even more so in the world that we're in right now, because it is harder, it's tougher. There's greater expectation, often less resource, and what we're doing, we're not doing it often sat next to people that are seeing the good stuff. Like, our change in work pattern is making this harder, so we have to kind of, almost change like how we get that recognition from what used to happen years ago. Like, the world
Yeah,
is a different place right now. So I think, yeah, it's a really important one, another really important topic.
yeah,
But thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in, for listening, for watching. We're loving getting your feedback. And yeah, we really do want that feedback ourselves to be able to shape our future episodes. We want to keep bringing valuable topics to you. So please share. We don't just want the positive feedback, we want the constructive feedback as well. So if there are things that you think we could improve, topics that we've not yet covered, like, just please do let me know. Me,
yeah.
us.
Yeah,
Not me
absolutely.
particularly.
No, us, and I think, and this is the interesting thing because we're now a few episodes in and we've had some great feedback, and it does come up in
Yeah,
conversation with new clients, with
yeah,
existing clients, and I think this is for me, one of the points of this podcast is to offer those little pivots and those little moments to take from each one. You might not need all of them at
yeah.
once, but it's about building it as and when you need it. So you go and select the episode that works for you. So please, yes, bring us more topics. We love doing this.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Thank you. Bye
Bye-bye.
bye.
Bye.
Thank you for tuning in to Procurement Pivots. We hope today's episode gave you actionable tips to help you to continue to move forward in your procurement career.
If you enjoyed the conversation, follow our episodes, share them with others, and please support us on our social media channels for others that might be interested to tune in.